A military demarcation line cuts through the middle of the Korean peninsula. Steel barbed wire spans the entire distance, dividing North and South Korea. The demilitarized zone symbolizes bitter grievances on both sides of the border. The DMZ represents war, destruction, division, and military tensions. However, people also look upon the DMZ as a place where peace, nature, and a stable coexistence can be achieved someday. DMZ, where peace and nature exist. At the end of World War II, the United States and Soviet Union occupied the Korean peninsula under the guise of disarming the Japanese army. The two superpowers decided to divide Korea at the 38th parallel, which tore apart the nation. Those who do not learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. How did Korea succumb to Japan and become its colony? Korea is a peninsula that neighboring nations have sought to control because its geographical location would allow them to pursue an expansionist policy on both land and sea. At the turn of the 20th century, Western nations were expanding their power, but Korea's Joseon Kingdom did little to strengthen security and defenses. Since internal fighting and corruption in the royal court was rampant, it allowed encroaching foreign powers, and subsequently, the kingdom fell under the control of Japan. After Korea gained its independence, the country repeated the mistakes it had made in the past. The United States and Soviet Union divided the Korean peninsula at the 38th parallel as part of a long-term struggle between two ideologies, capitalism and communism. To the north, Kim Il-sung came into power, while in the south, Syngman Rhee came into power. In 1948, general elections for the new Korean government under the UN-brokered agreement were canceled. Kim Il-sung and Syngman Rhee each announced their own government, splintering the nation into two. Kim Gu and Kim Kyu-sik, who bravely fought for Korea's independence during the Japanese occupation, found themselves attacked on both sides for being moderates. The day of Japan's defeat was also the day that brought independence, but the nation was embroiled in a civil war. The Korean War inflicted immeasurable pain and suffering to the country. Total casualties are estimated at over 4.8 million lives. More than half of those who died were civilians. The war begat 300,000 war widows, 100,000 orphaned children, 3.2 million refugees, and 10 million people separated from their families. 80% of the country's infrastructure, 45% of the industrial sector, and 75% of all governmental facilities were destroyed. More than half of all homes were either destroyed or damaged. The Civil War tore apart the nation. As the brutality and unbridled violence of war continued, the sentiments on both sides hardened. Anti-communism and anti-Americanism reached new heights, leading to a deep-set hatred. After fighting for 37 months, an armistice agreement was signed on July 27, 1953. The war front line at the time of the signing was chosen as the military demarcation line, or the truce line. The line starts from the mouth of the Imjin River and goes all the way to Myeongho-ri. Altogether, 1,292 posts, each separated by 200 meters, were staked to the ground. The total length of this truce line is 248 kilometers, or 155 miles. Under the armistice agreement, both sides are supposed to keep a distance of 2 kilometers from the truce line. So the width of this area was set at 4 kilometers, and this area is the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ. But the hastily drawn truce agreement left out many particulars, and the rule banning light weapons in the DMZ have been broken. In the 2-kilometer wide swath of the DMZ belonging to North Korea, there are mortars and anti-tank guns in position. About 350 North Korean military posts also lie within this area, in addition to landmine fields. On the south side, there are also approximately 100 military guard posts, concrete barriers, and military camps along the DMZ. In addition, both North and South Korea have moved the barbed wire on their sides a little closer to the military demarcation line. Thus, the width of the DMZ is currently less than 4 kilometers. While most people figure that the military demarcation line is the truce line, that is not so. The military demarcation line is actually 2 kilometers to the south of the DMZ and also includes civilian residential areas. The civilian no trespassing line keeps civilians out of military exercises and army bases, but farmers who own or lease the land within the line are allowed to enter. The area south of the DMZ's southern limit line but north of the Han River is designated as the Civilian No Trespassing Zone. Having a total area of 1,528 square kilometers at the time the armistice agreement was signed, this area lies 10 kilometers to the south of the military demarcation line. Even though Korean troops guard the military demarcation line on the south side, Korea has no military authority of the DMZ. In the armistice agreement, North Korea and China have joint control of the north side of the DMZ, while the south side is controlled by the United Nations commander. Vowing to reunify the nation, the Syngman Rhee administration was adamantly against the armistice agreement at the time. That is why, today Korean soldiers must receive permission from the UN commander in order to enter the DMZ. Korean soldiers who have permits to enter the DMZ carry badges that say 민정경찰 in Korean. In accordance to the armistice agreement, soldiers carrying weapons are not allowed into the DMZ, so 민정경찰 or civil police is the designation. On a side note, North Korean soldiers who enter the DMZ are called 민경대. Since the truce agreement, military personnel and civilians are not permitted to enter the DMZ unless for military purpose. Restrictions and controls are changing the DMZ. Unlike the rest of South Korea that has been developed indiscriminately, the area around the DMZ remains untouched. Due to limits on development in the DMZ for 60 years, the battle-torn land naturally restored itself during that time. The east-high, west-low terrain of the Korean peninsula can be observed in the DMZ area. There are mud flats, flat plains, low mountain ranges, and marshlands between the west and east coast. Approximately 4,873 plant and animal species, along with 91 endangered species, inhabit the DMZ. While only comprising 1.37% of the nation's land, the DMZ supports more than 41% of all indigenous species of Korea. These figures are quite surprising in light of the fact that the DMZ is full of landmines. In addition, the only eco-corridor that spans from east to west in the country is the DMZ and Civilian No Trespassing Zone. The Paektu mountain range and mud flats on the east coast intersect with the DMZ area. This creates a habitat for wildlife such as the Asiatic black bear, goral, musk deer, and other large mammals. The east coast of South Korea boasts beautiful scenery, thick forests, rocky terrain, and an ideal habitat for large mammals. On the DMZ's east side, there are pristine wintering grounds for migrating birds that also breed in the area. The ecological importance of the DMZ is gaining attention domestically as well as internationally. The ecosystem of the DMZ is one of the few in the world that was naturally restored and must be protected for the sake of humankind. Historically, the DMZ sits in an area that was once fought over by Baekje, Goguryeo, and Silla. Northern forces fought the southern kingdoms, resulting in not only war, but also cultural exchange. Remnants of the buildings that were built after the Japanese occupation and the horrors of the Korean War are dotted around the region. Panmunjom and secret underground North Korean tunnels are located on the DMZ too. So, ancient history and more recent developments coexist in this corridor. The truce line is an uninterrupted line that extends from the east coast to the west coast of the Korean peninsula. At the turn of the 21st century, the cold relations between the two Koreas began to thaw. A North-South summit meeting was held. The Gyeonggi Line and rail tracks on the east coast were reconnected. South Koreans were also able to travel to Mount Kumgang by passing a land route on the southern limit line. The Kaesong Industrial Region was built with collaboration, and trucks loaded with raw materials and finished products run back and forth the border. But recently, the North-South Exchange and Cooperation Program has been stalled due to rising tensions between the two Koreas. In such times, we must act wisely. While assessing the prevailing conditions on one hand, China, Japan, US, and Russia must also be closely watched. It is up to Korea to solve its own problems. While it is much easier to solve a problem with the help from a foreign ally, once the problem is gone, the ally will usually stay put. This has occurred again and again in history. The division of North and South Korea was caused by outside powers, but mending the division is now Korea's responsibility. Obviously, no foreign country will be willing to reunify the two Koreas. The reunification of Korea might occur sooner than anticipated. Thus, we must prepare ourselves for the day when reunification happens. If we vacillate, then reunification might slip through our fingers, perhaps even allowing another country to absorb North Korea. For the sake of reunification in the future, we need to revisit the value of the DMZ. The DMZ symbolizes the Korean War, tensions, opposing ideologies, and hatred, but it can become a place symbolizing peace, nature, cultural exchange, and cooperation. Splitting the nation into two caused irreversible suffering. During the Civil War, Koreans were pitted against each other. Now, it is time to make peace, and it can start with healing the destruction to nature that was wrought by humans. In order to achieve reunification, we need to have a clear mission that takes into account the geopolitical circumstances. A systematic and well-organized plan must be put in place. Our stated goal must be establishing a united and new civilized nation that is based on peace. In order to attain this goal, we must build a stronger nation. Domestic politics must converge to share a common goal, and South Koreans should accept North Korea with open arms. We must have a strong alliance with the United States while making overtures of peace with China. Since 1998, the Korea DMZ Peace Life Valley has carried out initiatives supporting training, surveying, and regional cooperation that will be needed for the peaceful transition of the DMZ. By partnering with the international community, the organization aims to raise awareness of the DMZ as a valuable component for peace. The Korea DMZ Peace Life Valley holds 170 international awareness programs and Peace Life reunification programs a year, with slots for 6,000 domestic participants and foreigners from 100 countries in all age groups. DMZ, where peace and nature exist. The DMZ will be reborn as an agent of change to make peace, not war. To reunify a nation instead of standing divided, to replace aggression with cooperation, to facilitate communication instead of a breakdown in talks, to support life, not death, and to buttress restoration efforts and prevent destruction. A land of peace, nature, and culture. This is the future image of a unified Korea, and it begins at the DMZ.